From Vocaloid games like Project Diva to every possible iteration of Guitar Hero known to man, including 10 main series releases, rhythm games have had growing popularity over the years, by musicians and music newbies alike. But how are these games viewed by each party? How are they played? And what's most difficult for each? Watch this to find out. Hello everybody, and welcome to yet another Fireside Chat. Today we're discussing rhythm games and the infamous, or at least infamous to me, a musician, relationships that musicians have with such titles. Though a game based entirely around keeping a beat and tapping out songs seems like a perfect match with an experienced or even moderately skilled musician, to some, the button mashing that such games offer can be a menace. Often, musicians will find themselves horribly screwing up the timed button presses that such games offer. The wound is deepened by the expectations others have on their performance. When a musician plays a rhythm-based game, you expect them to excel. But why is it so hard for many seasoned instrumentalists or vocalists to keep a beat when it comes to video games? Of course, there's always a simple fact that some people are just not good at video games. But what about all the musicians and gamers who still struggle to keep a virtual beat? Well, there's a couple factors that come together to make this reality. First, and in my opinion most importantly, is that rhythm games are marketed towards anyone who enjoys music, not necessarily anyone with any rhythm or musical talent. Game makers want their audience to be as large as possible, allowing them to have the most sales and therefore make the most money. To allow this, rhythm games cannot require any major degree of rhythmic or musical gift. Thus, rhythm games tend to be more based on visual cues and hand-eye coordination than anything. Think about it, there's always some sort of visual cue to the game. A circle enclosing the note, denoting proper timing when the circle comes in contact with the note. Or a line that waits for the note to fall into it. In my experience, and that of many frustrated musicians on forums, musicians are not necessarily very good at rhythm games because of this reason. From my personal encounters, the actual beat in rhythm games tends to be a little late, as most rhythm game players are reacting to the beat, not feeling it and predicting it like a musician should be able to. So, whereas a musician would likely press the button or click the mouse exactly on the beat, others are reacting to the audio and visual cues of the beat, and therefore have a lagged reaction. As the game is catered to them, musicians often find themselves striking too early, or even overcompensating and striking too late. This throws a huge wrench in a musician's learning curve. Despite what may make sense from the outside, it might take a musician even longer to learn a rhythm game than someone with zero musical experience, as a musician has to learn to override their instincts and previous rhythmic teachings to make way for the delayed timing of many rhythm games. Chaos Dent, a user on Giant Bomb forums, sums this idea up pretty well, saying, "My point is, rhythm games tend to have steep learning curves and high skill ceilings, and I wouldn't expect musicians to be able to short-circuit that learning curve. I think your aptitude for rhythm games mostly has to do with your ability to learn hand-eye coordinated patterns, and your interest in the game has to do with your interest in the music and presentation, and your tolerance for the learning curve." But that's not the only thing about rhythm games that can throw off a musician. On higher difficulty levels, when the song gets harder and faster, it's more about hand-eye coordination than anything else. Often, the long strings of notes in the highest difficulty setting require nothing more than timed button mashing, which can turn the tides in a non-musician's favor very easily. On the contrary, it also seems as though slower songs and easier difficulty settings turn the tides in the musician's favor, as a lack of frequent beats and pulsing requires more subdivision and feel of music. For those non-musicians watching, subdivision is where you fill in the empty space between the major beats with smaller beats to help keep time. Or could it all just be in our head? Does the added expectation on musicians make what would otherwise be a normal learning curve seem like a lack of proficiency? While I'm sure this makes up part of the issue, as we discussed before, a musician's learning curve can be not only equal to that of the average gamer, but oftentimes greater, as it requires suppression of musical teachings. Another musician on the same forums, KQED=Volvo, argues that there's really two types of rhythm games. The first being those involving tapping out pure rhythms, and the second being those using fake instruments, like Guitar Hero. He argues that the first type benefits musicians more, as it forces the player to actually be able to follow the beat, at least somewhat. Although I understand this angle, as we've already discussed, even pure rhythm games can disrupt the most skilled musicians with their delay. On the other hand, I agree with the argument that fake instrument games put more emphasis on hand-eye coordination than actual musicianship. While it may seem as though the presence of a physical instrument would make a musician feel more at home, it actually promotes musicians to revert back to their actual musicianship, which will not only hurt them in the long run, as a mechanical instrument obviously doesn't behave like the real version, but will hurt their sense of rhythm, as, like we said, there's a whole new way to feel the music you have to learn in order to succeed in rhythm games. So, we've talked about musicians' notorious trouble with rhythm games, but what about the other end of it? Contrary to what you might think, many non-musicians are very good at rhythm games, despite having no sense of rhythm or even tone whatsoever. As stated by user Tob Rob on Giant Bomb forums, I have the complete opposite problem, referring to the issue of musicians being terrible at rhythm games, of course, where I can do all the game things pretty darn well, but suffer from being basically tone deaf. Can't keep a rhythm for the life of me. This is due to the same reasons that become the downfall of musicians. There's a learning curve for anyone, most games are based more on hand-eye coordination than anything else, and harder levels tend to have even more emphasis on coordination, making a gamer would be more likely to get farther in a game than a musician with the exact same skill level. To add to this, there's always that extra wall of music teachings that musicians have to overcome. Despite the clear weight in a non-musician's favor, rhythm games have kept musicians and non-musicians alike coming back for years, from more original and music-themed titles like Guitar Hero to the more modern and less obvious rhythm games like Geometry Dash. Despite the steep learning curve they may have, they are one type of game that I believe will always be a fun way to spend a lazy afternoon. If you're a musician yourself, or know any musicians, think about these things next time you play a rhythm game, and challenge yourself or your friends to overcome the odds and become a rhythm champion. And with that, remember, we didn't start the fire, we just keep it burning. Thanks for watching. What's the best rhythm game you've played? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoy what we're doing here at Pineapple Studios, consider leaving a like or subscribing while you're at it. Though I haven't played many recently myself, I do enjoy the rhythm mode in Super Mario Party, if you count that as a rhythm game. Right now, Cell is playing the Vocaloid game Project Mirai, which I got to try the other day and really enjoyed. You should check it out. At any rate, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.